Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the 1996 novel, Land of the Minotaurs. It's by Richard A. Knaak, and you can see my copy here. I bought this when it was published when I was in my first year in college from the local bookstore when I was at Morgantown at West Virginia University, and then I never read it. I figured I'd read it soon. I really enjoyed Richard A. Knaak's stuff in the Dragonlance universe. It started in 1988 with The Legend of Huma, which we've reviewed for you, which I consider to be my favorite spin-off in the Dragonlance after the original Chronicles and Legends by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. That kicked things off. And then the next one was 1990's Kaz the Minotaur, which was the second book that also features one of the characters, the spin-off character Kaz the Minotaur, which you can find out from the name of the book. And it's a sequel to The Legend of Huma, which I read as soon as I read it. I read both of those in junior high, in back-to-back, because they had already been published by the time I went and started doing a deep dive into the Dragonlance stuff. Now, I had read the entire Dragonlance books that I own, except for this one, which was published after I stopped reading Dragonlance books. In college, I was doing deep dives into Michael Moorcock and H.P. Lovecraft and those sorts of things, and I really wasn't in a Dragonlance frame of mind anymore. I hadn't read a Dragonlance novel in like 5 years, but I bought it thinking that I'd eventually read it because I really did enjoy Richard A. Knaak's stuff. I followed Richard A. Knaak from his first published novel, Legend of Huma, which was a best-selling novel that kicked off this series, and then I moved and I followed him to his Dragon Realm series. And there's a lot of novels in that one. So I definitely enjoy the author. Again, The Legend of Huma is my favorite spin-off novel that's not by Weiss and Hickman in the core series. It's also the first novel that's not about one of the key figures that's introduced in the initial trilogy. In one of the preludes or the sequels or the sidequels of characters that were introduced, finding out more about their lives, like Theros Ironfell. And so it's... and I think that Richard Knaak did a great job in The Legend of Huma of telling this story and finding unique beats to it, because the story was already pretty well known in the first 6 novels that were told by Weiss and Hickman that he then went off to. So I definitely appreciate Richard A. Knaak's novels, and this has formed a sort of a loose trilogy. Now, it wasn't published as a trilogy. The first novel was published in 88, the second novel was published in 90, and then the next one's published in 96, and 6 years later. So it wasn't published as a trilogy. As you can see, Land of the Minotaurs isn't a part of a trilogy of characters, but it is the third and final novel to feature Kaz the Minotaur. The first is a spin-off character, and then the last 2 as the lead. So I gave The Legend of Huma a 7 out of 10, and I gave a 6 out of 10 to Kaz the Minotaur. So what am I giving Land of the Minotaurs? Well, I think it's also a 6 out of 10. I enjoy what happens. I enjoy the political aspects of the Minotaur nation being developed and discussed. And you take a deep dive into it, and so I really enjoyed that a lot, and it was a lot of fun. And so it's definitely worth your time, especially if you've read the first 2 novels in the series. But again, it's a lot of fun things that are happening in it. The political aspects are interesting. What ends up happening is interesting. Some of the surprises that happen in it aren't things that I saw happening having read this for the first time. And so it's a lot of fun, and seeing it and rereading it. There's a lot of, again, fun things that happen. The basic key core concept of this is that Kaz has to go back to his homeland that he's abandoned. And in order to rescue one of his best friends. The second novel has ended, and he's now married his love interest, and they have twins. So she's now with children, and so they are, and he has settled a colony, if you will, south of the Minotaur kingdoms. There are 2 Minotaur kingdoms, and so he will go, and then his wife's brother and one of his best friends will go back to the main capital of one of the Minotaur kingdoms. He won't come back, and so he goes back in order to save him. And now it forces him to go back to his homeland and his home capital for the first time in a long time. And he has to face, some of his former friends, some of his former rivals, family, and that sort of a thing that he abandoned. And there's a lot of political aspects that also happen too. And I think Richard A. Knaak has some good world building that happens in this novel as well. So I'm giving this 6 out of 10. It's definitely better than Kaz the Minotaur, which would make sense because by now Legend of Huma was the first novel that Richard A. Knaak ever wrote. He'd only written and published 3 short stories in the Dragonlance world before this. And then after this, Kaz the Minotaur was just written, a couple of years later. By then, he'd only written, I think, 1 or 2 novels in the Dragonlance series by then. And then you have this, and this is written 6 years later. So by now he's much more developed as a writer. So it would make sense that I think it's better written, better, well balanced. I think there's more things that are happening in it. It has a grander scale than Kaz the Minotaur certainly does, and I think he definitely nails it. So this one feels more like a 6.5 or a 6.4 out of 10. He's doing better than I think a regular 6, but I'm going to round it down to a 6. It's not at Legend of Huma levels, but it's definitely interesting. It's worth your time, especially if you've already invested some time into this series and you're wondering whether the 3rd book is worth it or not. I think it is. As a reminder, I keep my reviews spoiler free, so I'm only giving you like the basic outline that you learn from the first couple of chapters. And then that's it. I'll leave you to it. So that way, in case you haven't read it, you're not getting spoiled by my review. This is a good place to start the Dragonlance for those people that are thinking about reading Dungeons and Dragons books but have never actually done it. I have lots of friends that are my age that lived, or a little bit younger, that lived during this era of like best-selling, books in these D&D worlds like Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance or Ravenloft or Greyhawk, who have never actually taken some time out, but they're familiar with the game. They're still playing. They're still active D&D players. So I think that the Dragonlance Chronicles are a good place to start. Dragonlance Legends is the next place to go. That 3-book series, and then I think the Legend of Huma will probably be the next place to place. It's a good. I think Richard A. Knaak does a great job with it. And then, this would then be the natural end of this sort of unofficial trilogy, the character Kaz the Minotaur. It definitely ends in a nice, suitable place. You're not expecting anything more from the novel. So I appreciate that. Richard A. Knaak is mostly known for writing novels in series. He wrote in some Conan stuff, a few novels. He's written 6 novels in the Diablo series. He's also read 10 in the Warcraft series. So he's definitely somebody who's known for writing a lot of series fiction in worlds that were created by other people in spin-offs. And Dragonlance, again, is where he started writing 3 short stories, and then he was in the Dragonlance world. And then he published his first novels in the Dragonlance world. It's best-selling. TSR, and I really appreciated this, thinking about this now, going back, put a lot of faith into unpublished authors to kick off their series. For example, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman had never published anything before as a novel before they wrote their first novel in the Dragonlance Chronicles, and that's a best-selling 6-book series that put them on a map in a major way. Richard A. Knaak, this is his first time novel for The Legend of Huma, for the first major book in the series that's not by a character that was created by Weiss and Hickman and appeared in the first trilogy. That also is a best-selling by a first-time writer. Ari Salvatore is the second book in the Forgotten Realms series with his Dark Elf stuff. The Crystal Shard, bestseller. Douglas Niles, who had worked for the company and created things like modules for the company, also was a first-time writer for Darkwalker on Moonshae. Also a big seller to kick off these series. And I appreciate that they had trust in these new authors. Today, you would never have that. A brand new spin-off series, you would have an established writer writing those sorts of things and so forth. But I think finding the right voice for your talent, finding. So I appreciated that a lot of these earlier writers are first-time novelists kicking off or having major things to say about these worlds that have already been built and are kicking off these novel series. So I appreciate that they had faith in younger writers. And they had some great best-selling success from Richard A. Knaak, from Weiss and Hickman, from Salvatore, and good sells from Niles. So Anyway, but I think that's pretty interesting. I read this novel in 4 days with about an hour and a half each day. So it took me about 6 hours for me to read it. It's about 314 pages long. It's pie length. So it didn't take me that long to read, about 6 hours all total. I read it when I was on vacation. I started on the flights over to Little Rock from my home in Baltimore for spring break. I like to go to a new place each time, and I've never visited Arkansas, so I knocked Arkansas off my list of states I've never been to. I always like to go to a new place. So I read the first about an hour and a half on the page on the flights over from Baltimore to Little Rock, and then over the next 3 days at night, after I finished exploring the city, I knocked it out too. So that was a lot of fun, and I definitely enjoyed it. And again, it was worth my time, and it was worth. And definitely, I appreciate going back to it and rereading. Now I'm going back and rereading the Dragonlance Chronicles and finding out what I actually think of a lot of these things. I think I read most of these in junior high. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read Land of the Minotaurs? What did you think? Did you agree or disagree? Would you like to talk about spoilers in the comments? If so, I would be more than happy to talk with you further about it in the comments below. If you like this video, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.